Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy Psycho, and I've got another Fear the Walking Dead video for you all today. And this one is going to be my review of the Season 2, Episode 7, mid-season finale, titled Shiva. And right off the bat, I just want to say, dang, this episode was especially sad for me. This will be a spoiler review, but right now here's your warning that this review will consist of spoilers. Here it goes. I cannot believe my favorite character, as some of my consistent viewers know, Daniel Salazar is my favorite character in the Fear the Walking Dead show, so to see him go out like that is just definitely sad. Now, I do know that there is a possibility that this could be another one of those fake-out deaths. However, I'm kinda iffy on that idea because, of course, I would love to see more of Daniel Salazar, but then again I would think, are there too many fake-out deaths in this series? And that's just one of those things where you look on both sides and you see the negatives and positives. Either way, let's pretend that Daniel Salazar did die, and if he did, that just really makes me sad. And honestly, it wouldn't really make sense for this to be a fake-out death, just because we got a lot of closure with his backstory and the things that were going on with him in that moment. However, the fact that we didn't really see him actually dying or even getting injured, the fire was between his legs, plus he didn't get any real closure with Ophelia, that makes me wonder as well. As we kept getting interaction and backstory with Daniel from the beginning of this episode up until the very end, it started looking pretty bad for him as we got halfway through and a lot of his backstory was being covered. One very interesting thing that I would like to note is the fact that in the last episode, when Daniel was about to stab the zombie boy in the eye, we saw that little flashback. It looked as if Daniel was the one who was grabbing the boy by the neck. However, we saw an interesting twist in this episode that Daniel was in fact the boy that was being grabbed. The visualization and imagery with all of the dead bodies floating in the river really creates a different tone for me in the way that it adds a lot of impact, because we know that whoever has Daniel at that moment, they have cleared out his whole community and given him no choice but to kill his own people. That's at least what I took from the situation. I'm going to continue on with that idea later on in this review, but first off, I just want to start out with the beginning of this episode. We started out with the aftermath of Celia and how she reacted to Thomas dying and Strand not killing himself to go with him. Of course, it was something that I expected. We saw that she was mad because Strand didn't meet her expectations because he didn't follow through with the plan that she had. This makes a lot of sense considering her mentality with all of the dead and the way she views them. We see her tell everyone to leave, and we notice that Nick is actually trying to persuade her a little bit, and we know that Celia likes him, so what he says to her is going to make her think a little more clearly, and she'll take that into consideration. Of course, one of the ways that we see him persuading her once again is by bringing back in Louise to give to her. Something that I found interesting from that was the fact that them not killing Louise by stabbing him in the head on Abigail actually paid off in the end momentarily because it gave them a little time with Celia. Before I move on with that, I just realized I forgot something with Daniel Salazar in the very beginning of this episode, and that was the moment where he was dreaming about when he was a kid, and they told him to kill that person, and then the gunshots happen. That's when it looks like he wakes up from the dream, and then he goes and finds Ophelia, and they go outside, and we finally see that little teaser that we saw on the AMC channel. And when I saw that teaser, I definitely thought it was going to be a dream by Daniel Salazar, and then we saw that was true as it occurred in the actual show. For me, I just didn't think that they would show something that major in a teaser, which is what made me think it was going to be a dream. We then hear the gunshots once again, and these are actually the gunshot of Strand shooting Thomas. Now, one thing I do find interesting about that is the consistency with the gunshots in the dreaming. That dream within a dream still makes sense just because the other gunshot that he heard was actually the gunshot of him shooting one of his people in the water that the guy forced him to shoot. I just thought that was pretty cool in addition because it wasn't something I thought about right up until now. It just shows that there still is some consistency with that dreaming. Now moving back on over to Celia and Nick and their situation, we got a really cool speech with Madison and Nick after he addressed himself in Walker Blood and Guts once again. I found it very interesting how Nick was talking to Madison, basically saying, "I can't die, I walk among them," and we saw this sense of confidence within Nick, as if he's really living up to what Strand has been telling him the whole time, that he is born to survive in this type of world. The way that he was talking did seem like he was comfortable in that different skin per se. After that, we then move on over to the aftermath with Chris and Travis. Of course, Travis goes to look for Chris, they're running through the fields, and then as time goes by, Travis tracks Chris up until he gets to a walker where a knife is stabbed in his head. I thought this was actually a pretty cool scene right here, just because of the imagery and what it implied. We saw that the knife was the same one that Chris had when he was with Madison and Alicia, so at first you think, well, why did he use up his knife? And then as the camera shot goes down to the empty holster of the man, we realize what's happening here. I feel like it would have been a little bit cooler, and it wouldn't feel as if they were spoon-feeding us if it had not shown Chris in the background with the gun strapped on him. Now, I still don't have a problem with this scene, but I felt like it would be pretty cool, and it would kind of let you do a little figuring out on your own. Anyways, we see Travis travel over to that little hut, that building, and of course his feet are very worn. I don't know what happened there, maybe he didn't have any shoes on, but he walks into the little building, and he meets another man in there. This is probably one of my favorite scenes of the whole episode, just because of the surprise factor and the little twist that was occurring. We get a lot of interaction back and forth between those two, and the idea is established that the man does not know English, so Travis is just working his own ways to try and portray what he's trying to say to this man. This is where Travis sees a picture of his son, and then he tries to connect it back over to Travis's son, and the man pretends to realize what he's saying. He points Travis east, and then tells him that's where his son went. This is the moment where Travis glances over to what I assume is maybe an English dictionary or something like that, and he says, "Are you sure you don't know English?" This is the moment where the man tells Travis that Chris has his son and he's threatening to kill him unless he tells him to go east. This really set in with a lot of impact for me, just because, dang, that is pretty brutal right there. The fact that Chris is threatening like an 8-year-old kid, threatening to kill him, that just shows how far Chris has gone since we first saw him. I just thought this was an awesome scene, and then we see Travis break in there, he's aiming the gun at Travis, and it just shows that Chris does not care about anyone at that moment. He's threatening everyone. We then see Travis struggle with Chris, knock the gun out of his hands, they run outside. Chris grabs Travis's knife, slings it at him, and then Travis finally knocks the knife out of his hand. Once again, there's another example that Chris was trying to kill Travis. He doesn't care about anyone. For a minute there, I thought maybe Travis was going to kill Chris, up until the moment where Chris just says, "I don't fit in this world," and I thought this was just going to be another Lizzie and Mika moment. However, we see that Travis doesn't give up on Chris, but he makes the decision to separate from Madison. This is something that I kind of didn't really see coming, just because it feels like these characters are cemented together just because of what they've gone through. Either way, I think this is going to bring some interesting storyline perspectives to the show in the next few episodes and seasons. Moving back on over to Strand and his situation, they have the funeral for Thomas. Strand basically threatens them and says, "If you try to do anything, I'm going to fight you." He just wants to bury his person. Meanwhile, we see Daniel once again and we realize he is going off the deep end. He tries to get Ophelia and take her out of this place because he believes it's evil, and we also see that he constantly tells Strand not to bury Thomas in this evil place. Daniel then fights off a bunch of the people and the civilians, and then that is where he's taken to Celia and tied up. To me, this felt like it was a very quick change with Daniel, and it was actually surprising to see him acting this way. We move back on over to Madison's situation with Celia, and this is the moment where she goes and talks to Celia, and she tells her that she wants to learn when she realizes that Celia is not going to change, and that Madison doesn't want to change so she can stay there. At this very moment when she said that she wants to learn, I was actually predicting everything that really happened in my head. I was thinking, okay, she's going to take Madison to where they take the zombies, and then Madison is going to lock Celia where they put the walkers to basically teach her a lesson and do a little poetic justice. And we saw that's exactly what happened. And in my opinion, like I said, poetic justice, this was just a very cool scene. And it was also interesting to see Celia just accepting that happening. However, one thing that I do want to pick out of this scene was the fact that it didn't show Celia actually dying. I believe that if they would have shown this scene right here, it would have added a lot more impact to the situation and add even more to that poetic justice. It just feels like this show sometimes shies away from those shots of people dying or even walkers dying. I don't know whether it's due to effects or any other things like that, but I do believe that they should add in more visuals to these deaths. On the other hand, you can look at it from a different angle and say that it's the unknown which is the importance of the situation. Moving back on before that, we get the situation with Celia and Daniel Salazar. This is where she has him tied up and she walks over to him and she's like, "I see hatred in your eyes, and if I didn't know any better, that's what I would believe." And then she tells Daniel that she knows he is fearing something. We then get that final reveal that Daniel is fearing the dead, but not the walking dead. It's the dead that he has caused is what he fears. And to me, I believe this is just an absolutely awesome moment, not only because I predicted it in my last review, but also because it just makes so much sense. Throughout Fear the Walking Dead and The Walking Dead, we've seen characters do a lot of bad things, but in the end, they have to pay for that eventually, and this is what's happening with Daniel. He's seeing his wife, it's talking about how he's being haunted in his dreams. So we finally get that reveal of Daniel's very first story, and one of the coolest moments out of that scene was when Daniel's wife says, "That wasn't the first victim, you were the victim." And it really put it in perspective to me that it wasn't just Daniel's fault for who he's become. He was basically given no other option, and he was put into this situation without a choice. He was molded and shaped by twisted artists. We see Daniel have his final moments where he's emptying the gasoline everywhere where the walkers are kept, and he starts to see all of the zombies' faces change into actual people as his wife emerges from them. He then drops the lighter and catches everything on fire. This is once again the moment that raises a little suspicion as to if Daniel really died. However, that place did blow up pretty quickly. It just raises a little suspicion though. Anyways, moving back on over, we get the part where Strand drives up in the truck, he gets Madison, he gets Alicia, and that's the point where Madison sees Nick, and Nick realizes that what Celia has been saying is kind of true. Another thing that I forgot to mention back when Madison locked Celia in the group of walkers was when Celia was discussing what she would do for her boy. She was talking about how she would love him when he couldn't love, she would feed him when he couldn't eat, and things along the lines of that. And then she raises the question to Madison, wouldn't you do that for your boy as well? And we realize that Madison is doing this act because she doesn't want her boy to be changed in a negative way by Celia. This goes back on over to Nick's mentality when he realizes that they are the ones that destroyed everything. This is why he decides to go on his own, and then he also tells Madison that Travis and Chris are not coming back. When I think about it now, Madison is really left basically on her own. She only has Alicia, and that's it. She's lost a lot of people. Overall, I believe this was a really great episode. I know there's going to be a lot of people that just don't like Fear the Walking Dead, and some that do like the show but they still have complaints. There are going to be people that complain that this was too much like The Walking Dead Season 2. However, I feel like some storylines are going to be consistent throughout this Walking Dead world. And although there were two matching mentalities that these walkers are just people with mental disabilities or other ideas, it would make sense because there are going to be people out there that would believe these things. I'm personally not annoyed with the fact that they were a little similar. However, I guess I can understand why some of those people out there are a little annoyed. I personally enjoyed this episode, and the fact that my favorite character died was definitely sad, but I also want to give them props to killing off likable characters. To me, it feels like no one really is safe, considering the fact that we don't really have that one main character like Rick Grimes within this group. That idea alone makes me want to give them props, just because we realize that no character is safe and that we do need to enjoy our time with them. As always, I really appreciate you all watching. It means a lot. Make sure to leave your thoughts and feelings in the comment section below. Did you enjoy this episode? What do you think about Daniel Salazar dying? Everything along the lines of that. Thanks again, guys, for watching. Peace out.